I want to do a follow-up on last full measure. The designer has made some changes that I think had a positive effect on the gameplay. We're going to kind of take a look at where we are here. You can see it's 11 a.m. on July the 2nd. So if you've gotten through the full first day, first night, taking us to a fairly historical position here. See Longstreet preparing his assault on the federal line. So he's got two divisions of his corps, Hood, McLaws, as well as Anderson attached. Federal are in a fairly historical position. However, I did force Sickles to assume his spot in the line here, so there will be no fighting in the peach orchard out here. But otherwise, things look fairly typical. The only difference is it's more of a horseshoe than a fish hook at this point. That's largely due to the fact that I had far more units survive the first day and recover after the first day in the 1st and 11th Corps for the Federals. So they just had more forces to sort of keep in reserve here in the center. It's kind of a big mess, but we'll see how that plays out. So I hope maybe one of the first things to notice, of course, is that I did construct the rest of the counters. The Longstreet's Corps on the Federal side, Sykes and Hancock, and the cavalry. So all the counters have been made, all the markers, 800 plus. A lot of work. Now the first change the designer made involves the command system. Essentially, he went back, did some research, some reevaluation on the command ratings he had given to their leaders. Initially, they were all rated a 3. I shouldn't say all. The vast majority were rated a 3. A few, like Lee, Reynolds, were higher, but most of the rank and file leaders, division leaders, were rated a 3. So on a 1d6 for the command system, that's a very small distribution range for the probability. So you were generally looking at 50, and with penalties, 33% chance of ever being in command. That led to most formations being out of command every turn, and kind of a choppy gameplay. But he went ahead and kind of looked at these ratings and generally increased them. So here in Hill's Corps, we have Pender is now a 5 from a 3. Heath went to a 4. Anderson is down there at a 5. Hill remained a 3, which is probably appropriate. So the effect is more formations are passing their command die roll. Therefore, more combat is occurring at a more sustained pace. So instead of formations out of command, kind of maneuvering for flanks to try to dislodge the enemy, they're actually in command and they're engaging the enemy and engaging in combats. So it felt a little more natural. As a player, it wasn't being dictated by the die roll when command or when attacks occurred. It was more a combination of the die roll and the effects of the battle. If units were disorganized, maybe taking losses, that drove the decision to press attacks or pull back and regroup more than the randomness of the die roll. So that's a positive thing. As a player, you want to make choices, not just react. But the designer very appropriately made another corresponding change. With all these units now in command, now they would be fighting more, so the potential of massive casualties was still there. So he softened the CRT. Slightly fewer loss results and more retreat and therefore disorganization results. And that had a pretty good effect. It kept things in balance. Now we would have forces engaged turn after turn, but not the massive 40, 50 point strength loss in 1 hour. You'd still get there with sustained combat, but it'd take 4 or 5 turns, something like that. And the effect of disorganizations pushes the enemy back, dislocates them, but also acts as a restraint on your own offensive operations. You can't attack with disorganized units. So I like that balance. That definitely kept things, in sync between command and combat. And it could have been a real bloodbath had that not been done. I'm not sure I've got the hang of that new combat approach, as evidenced by, the mass of units that survived the first day. A lot of the units were getting disorganized, retreating, falling back, so the Confederates were able to eat up territory, but I wasn't losing as many units. So that, combined with the recovery overnight, left me with far more units in the 1st and 11th Corps than I would have expected. So it could be I just haven't got the hang of when to press an attack and when to regroup, or maybe the CRT is just a little too soft at this point. But I'm going to go ahead and play out this second day. I think that'll take a very different look at things. The first day is very much a meeting engagement. Second day is very much a set piece battle. So maybe I'll get different perspective on the losses from that. There's one thing that I've been thinking about since I started playing this again. It has to do with stacking limits. Only 8 strength points can stack in a hex. So that means a brigade like this one, the 3rd Brigade, 3rd Corps, 3rd Brigade, 3rd Division, 1st Corps, with these very large regiments, can't stack. So they have to be either spread out in a line or really in depth in order to maximize their strength. So if you're defending, that's not so bad. If you get attacked here and you have to retreat, well, your guys behind you effectively become your reserve, and they can make a second line of defense. But in attack, it's a little weird, because if you're attacking with these two guys and these two are in reserve, if they take a loss, well, you can't sort of call up one of the regiments of your brigade. It's like if you're not stacked, you're completely out of the fight. So it feels like I should be able to support my brigade with the regiments in it. Maybe I can't support with other brigades in my division, but certainly the regiments in my brigade should be able to support each other. I wouldn't want to come up with some sort of crazy support rule that, you're within 2 hexes, blah, blah. I don't want to do that. But maybe it's that stacking limit. Maybe I can stack as many regiments as I want from the same brigade in 1 hex, but I can only fight with 8 strength points. So that could be a simple, abstract way of representing the regiments sort of coming up in support, called by the brigade leader. And over the course of the hour, and 250 yards, doesn't seem like that's out of whack. Now, it might make defenses too strong, but I'd still be inclined to want to defend in depth than all in 1 hex. So I don't know. I'm not going to do anything with that. I'm going to play out the second day. It's just been something I've been noticing as I've been playing. So this is a position at 6 p.m. on July the 2nd. Kind of the tail end of the Confederate attack here. It's starting to peter out. We would only have 3 more turns till nightfall anyway. The Federal breastwork line ran along the ridge here, and the Confederates have surged across it, even managed to set up some artillery here. But largely they have kind of held position. They haven't cracked. Now the 3rd Corps has been roughed up really badly. They have fallen back here. There's Sickles, and there's a couple of brigades. A couple shattered. I think 4 shattered altogether. The 1st and 2nd Corps are still holding in the north there. Ewell did attempt a diversionary attack in the north. Of course, I shouldn't say Ewell because he did not roll for command even 1 time. Johnson rolled numerous times. Even Rhodes got into it for 2 turns. But otherwise, this attack kind of had the effect it wanted. They took a few hexes here of the cemetery hill, but then ended up falling back when brigades started to shatter. Additionally, they lined up artillery here in this sunken road, had a pretty long artillery duel, but they got the worst of it. all the federal artillery here along the line just blasted them. They ended up losing 3 artillery units, and then, discretion being the better part of valor, they fell back out of range. Now the set-piece battle, which is what I was trying to look over here, kind of played out as I expected. The Confederates massed some artillery here and was able to keep pounding on the Federal line, disorganizing units. The Federals were in a pretty good defensive position with the higher ground and the breastworks. So there was a lot of fighting to the last man going on here. Since they didn't have to retreat, they would hold on, force the Confederates to take losses and either retreat or knock them out of position. If they could hold, they could then move up some kind of reserve to try to reoccupy those lines. And that worked for quite a while, probably a good 5 turns. But eventually, the concentration of the Confederate forces ended up shattering the 3rd Corps, doing a lot of damage to the southern end of the Cemetery Hill here, which is where the 2nd Corps was, or still is. And then eventually the 11th Corps shifted over and tried to get involved. They took some serious losses, but then things just sort of started to stabilize. Even though the Confederates have artillery here and they've been doing some damage, they've had some command problems as well as lots of disorganizations due to shattered brigades as well as just combat results. And that has cost them 2 turns of a full-out attack. This last turn was actually one purely of regrouping. So it's played out, I guess, the way I expected. It's a little different from that meeting engagement, but still fairly similar. The rate of loss was about the same. I didn't see anything that I thought was out of whack there. I mean, the Federal Third Corps was beat up badly, but still they're intact. They could assume defensive positions if they had to. I say the only weird thing I see, and probably I'm just forcing myself to see it, is this big blue blob behind Cemetery Ridge. And this is just the side effect of the stacking restrictions. As units started to take casualties, fell back, other units moved in. Well, they have nowhere to go. They in the space here, since they can't stack, they just kind of have to spread out. Then as the brigade started to recover losses, they spread out even more. So this part looks kind of weird to me. Obviously this is a bad formation to have. I mean, if you start to take losses, start to retreat, you start to disorganize all those units behind you. And that's not what anyone would want to do. We prefer to have, avenues of retreat open. I can't figure out how to organize the forces and position them within the space with those stacking restrictions. It's like the 8 strength points stacking restriction is good for fighting, but not so good for sort of a reserve position or regrouping position like this. So maybe I'm just, seeing what I want to see. But that's one of the, really the only strange side effect I've observed as I've played. It's hard to pull back and regroup and then move someone else forward, especially in this very cramped space. So I just wanted to get those comments in there. 2 different kinds of fights here at Gettysburg. See how they played out with these new rules. I think they helped a lot. There was still a lot of action even with the command problems. So plenty of things happening. And largely it's playing out the way I expect. It was fun. And my only reservation is with the stacking. Don't know quite what to do with that yet. And I'll certainly finish out the 3rd day, but I just wanted to wrap up with these final comments here.